Good morning, everyone. This is John Cogan. I'm the CEO of Proformative and a four-time CFO. And Proformative is the online community for corporate finance, accounting, treasury, and related professionals. First, I would like to welcome everyone to this morning's webinar entitled Recurring Revenue Management, Billing to Retention Best Practices. This webinar will focus on current and emerging trends in the technology and practices available to ease the enormous challenges posed in running a business within the context of a recurring revenue model. Are you a software as a service or subscription-based business? Do you take recurring payments from customers? Are your current contract management and invoicing systems right for your company? We will get to these and many other questions and talk about how people, process, and technology can have a positive impact if you're looking at recurring revenue business models. Next up, I'd love to thank NetSuite, our sponsor for today's event. Due to their generosity, we're able to do events like this and everything, frankly, that we do at Proformative at no cost to our users. It's our pleasure to be able to do that, and we heartily thank NetSuite for sponsoring today's event and giving us a wonderful speaker and a great content, which I'm looking forward to. A quick note about Proformative. To those of you who are new to Proformative, I'll just tell you a little bit about us. We're the largest and fastest growing online resource for senior corporate finance, treasury, accounting, and related professionals. We touch well over 500,000 of these folks, CFOs, controllers, treasurers, on a monthly basis, and we're happy to have you with us here today. Proformative, very quickly, is an online community and resource where folks simply share knowledge with one another. It's a free and open network, and it's completely noise-free, no ads or self-promotion or anything like that. So please check us out at proformative.com. Next up, a few notes on today's event. A link to today's presentation and the video of this webinar will be sent out to all attendees within 24 hours of the event. And you can also look at proformative.com/resources for the free download. So you can get today's slide deck and you can hear a recording of today's webinar along with the slides in the background for free, of course, at any time on Proformative. Those who would like CPE credits will need to answer today's two polling questions during the event and should have pre-registered for CPE credit. If you did not or have any questions at all, please contact Tanya Walsh, and you can see her email address right there. Next up, we want this to be an interactive event today. Please feel free to ask questions at any time. If you'll take a quick look at your GoToWebinar control panel, you'll see a little box there entitled Questions. You can ask questions at any time. We will hold the questions typically, unless it's a clarifying question, but typically we'll hold questions until we get to the Q&A portion, which is at the end of the event. But please feel free to ask your questions. And even if we don't have time to get through all questions during the webinar, we'll do our best to follow up afterwards and get your questions answered. And finally, at the end of today's webinar, when you step off or when we shut it down at the very end, you will be prompted to take a short survey. It takes 1 minute. We would greatly appreciate your feedback. We always want to do better the next time, as we say. And also in that survey, we make it very easy for you to request connection with the speaker. In case you would like us to connect you, we'll do that for you via email, and we make that nice and easy. And it's just a checkbox if you'd like to be connected. So please do stay on and give us that 1 minute afterwards. We greatly appreciate it. We're going to be covering a lot of territory today and all about recurring revenue. And by the end of today's event, we hope that we've given you a fair number of insights into the ins and outs of managing a recurring revenue business, which is really complex, as those who are dealing with it will be happy to tell you. And to help us on our journey today is Kimberly Odom. Kimberly is the Director of Vertical Marketing in the software vertical at NetSuite. Kimberly is a 15-year technology veteran with experience in enterprise software applications, including CRM, multi-channel customer service, marketing automation, and ERP. Kimberly is currently the Director of Vertical Marketing at NetSuite, and prior to NetSuite, she worked at Contactual, a SaaS provider of customer interaction management solutions, where she was responsible for the development and execution of the company's marketing strategy. And during her tenure at Contractual, Kim played a key role in driving the growth, which led to Contractual's acquisition by 8x8 in 2011. Her extensive background in technology also includes roles in product marketing, product management, and channel sales with startup, mid-market, and Fortune 500 companies. So with that, Kimberly, why don't I invite you to take it away?
Thanks, John. Welcome, everyone, to today's webinar. I'm really excited to be speaking to you today about the topic of recurring revenue management. The recurring revenue model is something that I'm intimately familiar with. Throughout my career here at NetSuite, at Contractual, companies like GTE, Verizon, Covad Communications, and Earthlink, I've managed product lines. I've also been responsible for go-to-market execution. At all of these companies, the business was built and driven by the recurring revenue model, so I have a lot of experience to draw upon. I'm happy to share that with you today. As John mentioned, at NetSuite, I'm responsible for all of our marketing efforts targeting the software industry. The software industry is where recurring revenue model is quickly becoming the primary business model for both new and existing firms. But as you'll see, the recurring revenue model, or what I will also refer to as the subscription model today, is becoming the de facto approach for industries beyond high tech. So let's get started. As you can see from the agenda, we have a lot to cover today. First, I'm going to start by sharing some research data on the rise of the recurring revenue economy, and we'll look at how that shift is impacting a large cross-section of industries. Then we'll go through some of the top challenges that organizations face when they choose to operate on a recurring revenue basis. Then I'm going to dive into best practices in two areas that are really critical to success. The first area is billing, and the second area is customer retention. Last, I'm going to take you through a couple of case studies. The first is a company called Kana. They're a software company that successfully transitioned large portions of their business to the recurring revenue model. And then we're going to take a look at a company called Hot Schedules, a fast-growing SaaS company who's been able to use the rise in recurring revenue to really fuel the growth in their business. So first, I'd like to start with a key data point from a recent Gartner research report. And as you look at this, this quote here, I want you to keep in mind that this research is focused on global 2,000 companies. And the estimate that Gartner has is that in the very near future, 35% of these organizations, and keep in mind this is the largest and most traditional enterprises, will generate revenue through a subscription-based model. That is more than 1/3 of the global 2,000. And most of the companies that are on the Global 2000 list today did not start out with a recurring revenue business plan. If you follow the software industry, you're already aware of strong companies that have built a business, very successful business, on recurring revenue. Salesforce.com is someone that people think of right away, companies like Eloqua, and of course NetSuite. I'm sure you've also noticed recent moves by both Oracle and SAP to tap into this trend. Oracle's made some acquisitions in this space, specifically right now in Taleo. For those of you who follow Oracle, tomorrow they're actually doing a public launch of the new Oracle Cloud. And SAP has also made some acquisitions to try and kickstart its recurring revenue business, most notably snapping up the company's success factors. My point here is that when two giants of the industry start to take notice of the shift to subscription as the means of service delivery, then you know that we are well beyond the tipping point. This year, about 83% of all new software companies that are bringing a product to business are actually delivering that via the subscription model. So this is a statistic from IDC. So here we can see that in some industries, the acceleration rate for adopting recurring revenue as the de facto model is really well established. And the software and high-tech industries, as well as the telecommunications industries, are really kind of the three of the key areas where this is something that started taking off a long time ago and really is, like I said, well beyond the tipping point. When you look across the software market landscape, just to stay there really quickly, you'll see that all the disruptive innovators that are out there today, companies like Box, Yammer, HubSpot, Bazaar Voice, Good Data, Eloqua, Cornerstone On Demand, all of these are organizations that realized that the subscription business model was gaining momentum in the B2B space, and they in turn built their entire businesses to take advantages of this shift, and the market has rewarded them as a result. Now this shift is not just happening in high tech. You see the recurring revenue model disrupting every different type of industry. So let's take some time and talk about some of those. The first, just to stay with high tech for a moment, but not specifically software, you can look at the infrastructure space. A company like Rackspace, they have quickly become a dominant player. Fewer and fewer companies are actually going out, purchasing servers, finding data center space, hiring people to put all that infrastructure in place and run it themselves. Instead, they're using services from companies like Rackspace, from Amazon Web Services, to set up and manage and run that infrastructure for them. Of course, when you start looking at the B2C model, the subscription model is something that has really just taken over both video entertainment as well as music entertainment. And those industries are very different now than what they looked like several years ago. Companies like Netflix, Hulu, Spotify, Pandora, Rhapsody, those are the companies that are the new guard when it comes to these two types of industries. And then let's just take a look for a minute at a very old school industry, the automotive industry. That is an industry that is also not immune to this shift. Car sharing subscription services such as Zipcar are no longer on the fringe. There are a number of factors at play here, but the rapid growth of car sharing has actually been fueled by younger drivers. And these younger drivers have a fundamentally different perception about what it means to own a car and what it means to have automotive-based transportation. When these people are surveyed, they actually view a car as a utility. They don't view it as something that should be possessed, or they don't view it as a status symbol. So for them, subscribing to a service to meet their car-based transportation needs makes perfect sense. And even though a lot of different industries, such as grocery and retail, have also been affected by the shift as well, we can talk even about how people are putting food on their table today. Community-supported agriculture, also known as CSAs, can now be found across the country. More and more consumers are choosing this approach when they look to acquire things such as produce, eggs, meat, things like jelly, and things that they would normally go to and purchase on a one-time basis in some form of a supermarket. More and more people are actually doing a monthly subscription to acquire these types of items. Now, you see some of the logos on the screen. I'm being a little bit facetious, right, with some of the logos that you see next to the Rest in Peace area, maybe with the exception of Sam Goody, which is no longer around. But at the end of the day, is Zipcar going to cause Ford to actually go out of business? Probably not. But the shift in purchasing for both consumers and businesses away from a one-time model to a recurring model, has that shift already had a profound impact on these industries and many more? Absolutely. So before we go much further, let's take a little bit of time to understand some of the fundamental differences between a one-time revenue model and a recurring revenue model. In a recurring revenue model, the booking is just the beginning of the business. Whereas in the old model of a one-time sale, the booking represented everything. And that's really kind of that's where everything starts. And then from there, the models are very, very divergent. The next area of difference is what you can learn by examining the P&L itself. At a traditional software company, where all of the license revenue was recognized immediately on the booking, everything that sales did in quarter shows up in the P&L. If someone wants to understand sales productivity or the rate of bookings growth, all they have to do is look at the P&L and they can get those answers. Unlike the old model, at a recurring revenue company, the quarterly P&L does not reflect in-quarter performance. With a subscription model, your quarterly performance represents the overall long-term performance of the business. Every quarter reflects the culmination of everything that's been accomplished up until that point in time. It represents every contract that's been signed, every customer that's been won or lost. And this is really important to understand because the P&L provides insight on some of the fundamentals of the business. For example, if the gross margin on recurring revenue is low, then there's a fundamental problem with architecture, delivery, or pricing, and those problems may be difficult or expensive to fix and will require a lot of focus to overcome. Instead of the key leading indicators about the quarter's revenue being a gut check on how your VP of sales is performing, It's a deferred revenue waterfall. Ultimately, what this means is that the critical success factor for a subscription-based company is to build, retain, and grow the recurring revenue stream. The hockey stick at the end of the quarter, that's no longer the key factor in understanding short-term results. Building a larger and larger recurring revenue base will be reflected in steady increases in quarterly P&Ls. One of the main benefits of a recurring revenue model is that it can, if you're doing things right, offer much more predictability. That, of course, assumes that you are focusing on and executing on a lot of things that we're going to discuss today when we get into the best practice. The other thing I just want to mention really quickly is that in a one-time revenue model, there's a lot of what we call fast-moving levers. I can, deeply reduce a discount in order to get a booking at the end of the quarter and have a big revenue number show up. Whereas in the recurring revenue model, there are more moving parts, but those levers are not as fast building. They're a little bit more slow moving. So now I'd like to talk about some of the key metrics. When you look at one-time recurring revenue model versus subscription model, the metrics that you're measuring as a finance professional are very different. So I just want to take some time and talk about what is kind of the core set of finance metrics when you're measuring performance. Two of the key metrics that are most important are ARR, which is annual recurring revenue, or monthly recurring revenue, MRR. Simply put, as a subscription business, we are trying to increase our bookings and the recurring revenue base. At NetSuite, we define recurring revenue as equal to our installed base of revenue plus bookings minus churn. When we measure bookings, here at NetSuite, we actually break them down into new business bookings and upsell bookings. We track and measure those separately, and we have goals against both of those metrics. We also measure and break down subscription and non-recurring bookings, and in our case, an example of a non-recurring booking would be a professional services engagement. These metrics measure how revenue will recur every term as part of their subscription. Churn represents the customers that you will lose and the loss of recurring revenue that comes with the result of that. When we get to the retention section, I'm actually going to spend a lot more time talking about churn specifically. The biggest expenditure in the P&L, and actually the one with the most discretion, is the sales and marketing line. So I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about some metrics there as well. Because the customer is essentially signing a multiple-year annuity, it makes sense to spend more money to win that customer than it does to get a one-time sale. But since it is such a large part of the P&L, it also makes sense to know that that spend is efficient and it's trending in the right direction. We use two metrics here at NetSuite to track sales and marketing efficiency. The first one is what we call gross S&M efficiency, and this metric is really answering the question, how much sales and marketing expense do I have to spend in order to get an additional dollar of bookings? The second, what we call S&M revenue efficiency, answers another question. How much S&M expense does each dollar of incremental revenue cost me? And of course, the second metric is something that you can only measure in arrears. But both of these are really important, and it's important to see how these are trending over time with your business. Customer lifetime value, or CLTV, is another metric that you'll see quite a bit. That's a long-term, kind of very strategic metric in nature, and there's a lot of components that go into that. And then adoption rate is also something that's really important, especially if you're a company that's operating with either a freemium model or if you're offering some kind of free trial for your customers to take advantage of. So now that we've laid the groundwork for the recurring revenue model, let's move on and talk about some of the top challenges that this model presents. As I mentioned on the previous slide, there's a lot of complexity in a recurring revenue business, more moving parts, if you will. At the center of most recurring revenue business models is the subscription itself, and the subscription can have multiple options for term and frequency. You can have an annual subscription, monthly. You can also see quarterly subscriptions, biannual. There's a lot of different things that might make sense. For many companies, in addition to the subscription, there are additional components that might be usage-based. For example, if I'm an email marketing software company, I might have a package that includes a fixed number of emails for each month, but I'll also have give the customer the option to purchase additional emails if needed. The number of emails is a usage component that also needs to be taken into account along with the base subscription. sticking with a software example, if they then deliver some portion of the product through a traditional perpetual licensing model, then that has to be handled properly as well. And if there's a free trial period associated with any of this, then that's just going to add another level of complexity. There are also services, maintenance, and support that has to be thought through of. How are these services delivered? Is professional services delivered via fixed fee, statement of work, or maybe it's time and materials? Delivering support on an ongoing basis. This can be accomplished via an annual support contract, or it may have a usage-based component, such as a certain number of phone calls that I can have with a specialist. Training and user conferences represent even additional revenue streams that have to be taken into account. Some of those are also can be delivered on a recurring basis. One of the most important things that we realized here at NetSuite is that building an effective subscription-based business is not just about finance or sales. It really cuts across the entire organization. There are a lot of business considerations as well as system and technology considerations that have to be put in place for everything to work properly. All parts of the business are really involved every day in building and maintaining that successful recurring revenue base. You have to consider the impact not only on finance, but also on sales, marketing, the product management organization, and the organization that's tasked with supporting your customers. One of the biggest things that we take a hard look at, and I have some best practices on, is managing the metrics and understanding customer value. This requires a real-time focus on customer metrics such as product usage, customer satisfaction, ranking your most important customers, and more. A strong process enables everyone to monitor, collaborate on this activity, and then prioritize things in accordance. Billing and revenue recognition, that's something that we're going to talk a little bit more about in the best practices because billing is very complex with a recurring revenue model. Product usage, I mentioned that briefly. We're going to talk more on that in the best practices. And then one thing that's also really, really important is the upsell and renewal management. Driving additional margin is particularly important in a recurring revenue model. And something like an upsell or a cross-sell can really move the line in terms of driving additional revenue for years to come. And this means that the sales organization and the rest of the people that are involved in either upsells or renewal have to be incented and motivated properly. So the recurring revenue challenges, and we're going to talk a lot about these in more detail, revenue leakage. This is loss from existing customers. If you have a customer that their renewal results in a downsell, maybe they choose not to renew at 100%. This could be because their business is shrinking or a competitor is taking business away from you. This will have a big impact on your business. Churn. I have a whole slide dedicated to churn because it really is the silent killer of subscription-based business, and it's a big challenge that has to be faced. Cross-selling and upselling, managing those things, very complex. We'll talk about some best practices there. And then billing is something that, once you have a recurring, and then if you've got usage-based components on top of that, a lot of companies try and handle that with manual adjunct billing processes, and that just drives increased costs, increased inefficiencies, and at the same time it can really hamper a firm's ability to deploy new pricing and packaging plans quickly. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in the best practices as well. And then, of course, revenue recognition becomes more and more complex. Once you move to a recurring revenue model, the order of magnitude from complexity, is about tenfold, and a lot of companies will also be in a situation where they have to throw full-time equivalents armed with masses of spreadsheets. Actually, a controller I was talking to the other day, when he was talking about when they first embarked upon recurring revenue, they ended up with something he called the giant intergalactic revenue recognition spreadsheet. And they aren't using that anymore, but it's a real challenge that, that people have to keep in mind as the complexity increases. Okay, and I think it's now time for our first polling question.
That's right. We're going to take a really quick break here. While we go into the first of our two polling questions, remember if you're here for CPE credit, you really need to take this polling question. question, and they're both polling questions. But even if you are not, we'd love for you to take, the 10 seconds or 15 seconds to read this and take this. It's really statistical data, which we'll look at and comment on when we get to the Q&A section at the end. So we'll leave this open for 1 minute and let everyone have a shot at answering this. While we've got this open, I'll remind everyone that you can ask questions at any time, and then we'll do our best to get to those questions during the Q&A section at the end, and anything that we don't get to, we'll follow up with you after the event to make sure you get your question answered. And we've got about 5 more seconds here, so go ahead and get your answers in, and then we'll get right back to Kimberly. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close it down at this point. We'll move to the next slide, and Kimberly, back to you.
Thanks, John. And don't worry, everybody, this slide is not meant to be a NetSuite commercial. The reason I just want to talk about NetSuite quickly is, as I mentioned before, recurring revenue is key to our business. We are a software as a service company, or a SaaS company, and that means that people subscribe to our solutions. We've been very successful with the recurring revenue model, and we continue to grow our recurring revenue streams. And our shareholders and investors look at these streams to determine the ultimate health of our business. What I'll be doing in the next set of slides is taking you through how we approach here at NetSuite the challenges that I just discussed, what we've learned from growing our own recurring revenue business over the past 10+ years, and the best practices that we believe have helped us to be successful. So let's start with covering some best practices in billing. And there are 5 best practices that I'm going to go through here today, specific to billing. And but first, I just want to spend a little bit of time talking about why billing is so important. The challenge with a recurring revenue model is because it's slow building business. There's lots of moving parts. Inadequate billing capabilities can introduce a lot of risk into what we've already learned is a very complex business model. Anytime you're going to increase your days sales outstanding, that can lead to cash flow problems. Actually, at NetSuite, we use a metric called DBO, which obviously stands for days billing outstanding. We actually don't track DSO, we track DBO. If you have errors, delays, incorrect invoicing, not only does that impact your financials, but it also undermines your customer satisfaction and trust in you as a supplier. And as you'll see when we start talking about churn, anything you do to endanger the ability to get that customer to renew, that is really going to undermine your success. The challenges any challenges that exist in your billing structure, if you're in a one-time model and you move to a recurring model, those are going to be magnified. And then once you get to the actual process of recognizing revenue, it's going to be even worse for you. Having real-time visibility into the key metrics that I described earlier, those are even more and more important because, like I said, there are so many different levers that can be used to manage the business. So with that, there's really 3 key things from a billing standpoint, billing infrastructure standpoint, that recurring revenue businesses require today. First is there has to be support for multiple and complex pricing models, and we'll talk about that in the best practices. Second is an environment that is as flexible as it is robust, and one that puts the customer at the center of that process, because keeping that customer year over year, month over month is very critical to success here. And the third is the real-time visibility that we just talked about, so you can measure those metrics and understand where you're going. All 3 of these are just absolutely critical requirements for success. So let's talk about best practice number 1. This is really, when it comes to billing, it's really understanding the bigger picture. Of course, billing is important. But I wanted to represent this visually because for us, what we've really recognized is that having a very robust, flexible billing and subscription management platform as the linchpin that everything must hook into has been a real best practice for us that I'm happy to share with you. This is the engine that drives pricing, rating, promotions. It also provides the rules and gives you the renewal capabilities that is so critical to building this business over time and keeping it and maintaining it. Then around that robust billing platform, if you will, you wrap in all kinds of other capabilities, your formal pricing and promotion management, the ability to generate opportunities the ability to then turn those opportunities into quotes, forecasts, sales orders, support for various go-to-market channels that you might be using. Here's also where you're going to be tying in to your revenue recognition, your GL, and all of your fulfillment capabilities. And then at the outermost level are other key business processes that get enabled, and those might be payment gateways with other vendors. There might be other kind of third-party hooks that are in your CRM system, any kind of mediation that you have, e-commerce present, and what have you, everything that you need to run your business. The main point is that for recurring revenue business, the robust billing and subscription management platform really is the heart and soul. Best practice number 2 is pricing flexibility. I mean, this is really key to survival. Products that we never dreamed about being able to sell on a subscription basis are now very common. Of course, things like wireless plans that have been around forever, that makes a lot of sense. There has to be a lot of flexibility. People are introducing new types of plans all the time. But things like enterprise software, the example you see here on the screen where you've got a professional edition and an enterprise edition, I mean, this is real enterprise software that would be used at a large or mid-sized company being sold on a subscription basis. And you can see there's a lot of components here. There's some things that are included here. One of them, I have a free trial opportunity. The other is a pilot, which, given that that's being sold to an enterprise customer, probably has a little bit more skin in the game than a free trial, if I could imagine. I'm not exactly sure about this company, but that's what I'm guessing they're doing. And so could you do something like that? Could you offer a free trial really quickly if you needed to? Could you quickly change the usage components of your pricing plans? Could you support rapidly testing pricing plans to see what's going to help you in terms of your sales and marketing expense and efficiency? Once your business is subscription-based, these types of changes happen much more frequently than you might imagine. And the last thing that you want to be spending your time on and your resources on is adjunct manual processes, because you don't have the pricing flexibility that you need in your systems. Best practice number 3, plan for the future. Plan for the future that I would even take that further and say that you maybe can't even imagine today. You really have to take a step back and say, wow, what is my business going to be like a year from now, 2 years from now? It might be very, very different. When I look at the recurring revenue model, there's really kind of 3 main models within the big umbrella of recurring revenue. Each of them have their own set of unique benefits, and you see those listed here on the table. The most straightforward is a subscription model. And a good example of that is your gym membership. I belong to a gym. They've been getting a steady stream of revenue from me for about 5 years. And I go to the gym on a regular basis. Each time I go, there's an opportunity for them to provide me with value. I love my gym. I'm there 3 to 4 times a week. I always have a positive experience. So that does everything to strengthen my relationship with them, and I continue to renew. So they continue to get that recurring revenue from me. Now, if something were to change all of a sudden, like let's say I had to travel 100% of the time and I couldn't go to my gym, well, then I might choose to opt out of my subscription. When I was thinking of this example last night, I thought about the Friends episode where Ross tries to quit his gym and he's unsuccessful in quitting the gym. So some people may think, oh, well, people can just opt out. That's easy. Actually, you'd be surprised at how many people will actually keep a subscription, especially if it's a low perceived cost to them, just for a convenience factor. The other model I would just want to talk briefly about is usage, and that is something where the price and revenue is tied directly to consumption. Water for your home or your building is a very good example of straight usage model. In most cases, there's no usage, then there's no charge. So companies may offer usage-only products to remove barriers to adoption as there's no charge to sign up. The third model is subscription plus usage, and most of you are very familiar with this because that's how cell phone services delivered and a number of other things. You subscribe to a plan that includes a certain amount of usage, and then once you go over the threshold that's included, there's additional pricing that kicks in once you've exceeded that. One of the biggest challenges that a company faces, if they're a recurring revenue company, is let's say they've built their business around subscription-only model, and then later they decide to add in a usage component. A change like that will impact multiple areas of the business, not just finance, and it will be a very painful exercise if they didn't have the forethought to plan for and lay the foundation to incorporate usage into their subscription plan. The lesson here, plan for the future, because the subscription economy continues to grow and change, and your ability to be successful is directly related to the speed at which you can quickly adapt to these changes, because if you can't, somebody else will. Best practice number 4 is to really take the time to carefully consider all the solutions that you have, whether they're processes, systems, underlying technology. Because the ability to be nimble is so critical, it's really important for you to understand the various billing solutions that are available to you, and you take the time to select one that's going to align well with your goals. You know, there are several capabilities that are considered table stakes, and those are some of the ones that I've listed here on the slide. They're pretty straightforward. You know, there's also a few that I want to just spend a little bit more time talking about. One would be flexible proration. That is very important. 9 times out of 10, if you're a subscription model, recurring revenue model, there are going to be prorated charges that have to be dealt with. You know, invoicing that integrates directly with your RevRec and GL is also should be considered table stakes, as well as built-in renewal capabilities to support upsell and cross-sell. If you just want to take a look at the usage-based components alone, the list is really long. You have to worry about things like metered usage, seat licensing, usage that's included, maximum and minimum thresholds, flat rating, volume tiers, cumulative tiers, usage filtering. You know, I could go on and on about billing complexity. You know, billing, regardless of what you do, is complicated, and recurring billing is even more complicated than one-time revenue billing. So taking the time to evaluate solutions and match them up to support your business now, and also what you envision your business looking like a few years from now, is definitely time that is well spent. And then the last best practice with respect to billing is really making sure that you have billing that's integrated with the financials. This is an approach that we've taken from NetSuite at day one. Our founders and executives knew that as a recurring revenue business, our ability to automate and integrate the end-to-end process would give us a competitive advantage, and they were right. There are a lot of organizations that have a great billing solution in place, but it's a standalone process that requires additional manual work to reconcile back with the rest of their financial infrastructure. That means they have FTEs that are dedicated to doing manual work between the billing system and the rest of the financial environment. Not only is that time-consuming and costly, it simply will not scale as your business begins to grow in size. And by grow, I mean either grow in terms of size from transaction volume or growth in complexity, because all of a sudden you have to worry about things like multiple currencies, multiple subsidiaries. So at NetSuite, our mantra here is that nothing is a separate process, certainly not something that is as important as billing. Okay, so next, let's move into some of the best practices around retention. Customer retention is the second piece of the puzzle when you're taking a look at recurring revenue. Early on, when businesses are first starting out, it's so easy to get caught up in focusing primarily on acquiring customers. And obviously, acquiring customers is very important. But equally, and perhaps more important, is focusing on retaining those customers once you have them. Because in a recurring revenue model, the customer and keeping that customer really is the lifeblood of your business. So again, I have 5 best practices that we use at NetSuite to keep our retention rates very high. And then as I promised, before we move into the best practices, I want to spend some time talking about churn, because it's so critical to understand the mechanisms behind churn so you can really understand why it can kill your subscription business. Nothing has the potential to do more damage to recurring revenue business than churn. Why is that the case? So let's take a look at why minimizing churn is so important. First of all, the rate of churn, when you combine that with the rate of new customer acquisition, that defines not only how fast you can build your customer base, but it actually tells you how large that customer base can ultimately grow. That's really powerful if you stop and think about that. Second, churn also defines, if you take 1 over the churn rate, that defines the customer lifespan. This helps you set customer lifetime value metrics and understand what the limits are of that customer lifetime value, which then in turn defines the reasonable limit that you can place on your customer acquisition costs. So, churn, here we have churn tying back into some of those sales and marketing efficiency metrics that we discussed earlier. Let's look at this in just some practical business terms. With a churn rate of 7%, you have to book enough business to replace your entire revenue base every 10 years before you can even think about revenue growth. So when you break it down that way, you realize it's a really daunting task. So it's really important to take a time to take a look at your product. Is your product inherently sticky? Is it something that people are going to use on a regular basis? For us, ERP solutions, very sticky products. Companies use those every day, so we have a sticky product on our hands, which is great. Then you have to take a look at the customers you're selling that product to. Are they inherently sticky? And quite frankly, there was a point in time in NetSuite's history early on where we had a very sticky product, but we weren't really selling it to sticky customers. And of course, we've changed that and are no longer doing that. But that's something else to keep in mind when you're thinking about churn. The bottom line is that a recurring revenue company with a high churn rate is fundamentally less valuable than one that has a naturally long customer life. So now let's talk about our first best practice with respect to customer retention. And that first is really taking the time to understand the value of each of your customers. All customers are not created equal. I can't say that enough. A lot of companies don't take the time to really think about this, really knowing their customer. If you don't understand your customer and you don't understand the value that that customer is providing to you, it's really impossible to effectively prioritize renewals and ensure that your resources are focused on the right customer. We've developed our own approach here at NetSuite. We call it Suite Rank. Essentially, it's a ranking that enables executives, sales, client management, support, marketing, product management to monitor our most critical customers. We use this in conjunction with understanding. There's several things that go into putting this rank together, and I'll just let you know what some of those are. We look at their likelihood of renewal as an A, B, or C. We look at a lot of different things to understand, is the customer possibly at risk for not renewing, so we can focus those resources as necessary. So we view driving a customer measure like Suite Rank as critical for driving our business. However, it means collecting data from multiple business functions to actually calculate that ranking. So we gather information from finance. We look at customers' recurring profitability, recurring revenue coming in. We look at information from client management. Is this a customer that's willing to serve as a reference for us? What's their Net Promoter Score, or NPS? We also take a look at, are they from a vertical that's all of a sudden very strategic to our company and we're trying to make a lot of inroads in? So we have a lot of different data that's coming in, and we're then kind of pulling all that data into a single source and using that to come up with this rank, which for us, we rank our customers on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being the most valuable and 0 being the least valuable. So it's really important to understand, to not only understand what these different metrics are, but to make sure that people have visibility into them. So every stakeholder has this information in front of them as part of their daily job. So we have Suite Rank. It's on everybody's dashboard together with all their other day-to-day tasks. This makes everyone who's involved in the renewal process or customer support process, gives them a very clear picture of who this customer is and why they're important to the organization. Next, best practice is really capitalizing on your customer annuity. As I mentioned, in a recurring revenue model, people are basically signing up for an annuity. And if all of your resources are just focused on getting new business in the door and you aren't focused on managing that annuity, you're really missing out. Building and pricing flexibility, some things we discussed earlier in the billing section. We know things that change, and being able to offer flexibility in pricing, also helps you when you come up on that renewal process. If you're not monitoring and managing the upsell and downsell, you're basically leaving money on the table. At NetSuite, we monitor these things at a strategic level as well as manage them at an operational level. Executive dashboard has insights into who's coming up for renewal, what's their likelihood of renewal. This helps us provide a real-time view into how the recurring revenue base is growing and actually drives into all of our forecasting efforts. For sales teams that are compensated on upsell, they can make they have all of that visibility into the metrics right there, so it's really easy for them to understand how to spend their time. Downsells are something that you have to be really mindful of, and monitoring usage, product usage, can really help you identify which customers are at risk for not renewing at 100%. And because over time, downsells, just like churn, will basically strangle that revenue growth. And lastly, really understanding your cost to serve. If you don't understand what it costs you to serve your customer, it becomes very difficult to make intelligent decisions about where and how you should be making investments in your customers. So moving on to best practice number 3, simplify the renewal process. We take a coterminous approach to renewals here at NetSuite, and that's something that we definitely suggest as a best practice to others in the recurring revenue business model. If you just look at here on the slide, you've got an initial sale and then you've got a couple of upsells. If I'm not making all of those sales coterminous, I'm basically introducing more touch points with the customer, more opportunities for the customer to maybe make a change or whatnot. So coterming brings all of those down into a single renewal per customer. This simplifies the back office work. It ensures that you can focus the team on a single renewal amount. And when managing renewals, we also automatically do all of this to make it coterminous, and then we begin the actual renewal process automatically about 90 days out. There's a whole set of activities that get kicked off around the renewal, and we really believe that from an efficiency standpoint, coterming is one of the single biggest improvements that an organization can make to position themselves for maximum renewal efficiency. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on revenue recognition, but just realizing that in a recurring revenue model, revenue recognition is really more complicated, and it's something that you need to be thinking about. Things about an upsell, how you handle professional services or non-recurring pieces of the business. Basically managing that is very, very complex, and by taking the time to look at the revenue recognition aspect as you're putting in your billing infrastructure and your renewal infrastructure, and making sure that there's ties there into all 3 of those is really going to save you a lot of time and a lot of headaches. And then best practice number 5, again, automate the process. This is something that is really critical. We tie all of this together, quote process through billing, invoice, revenue recognition, all the way to the renewal. Everything's tied together. We have a single repository of information, and it really has been one of the secrets to our success. Now I want to quickly move into just a couple of case studies. These are a couple of recurring revenue companies that have had a lot of success and overcome some challenges. The first is a software company, Kana. They make customer experience service management software. They're a large company. They help customers reduce handle time and improve NPS. More than 600 enterprise customers and half of the Global 100, and more than 200 government agencies use Kana. So Kana had some challenges. They basically were looking to move parts of their business to a recurring revenue model. They had always provided their software via perpetual license model. And because of some acquisitions they were looking to make and also some changes into what their customers were expecting and changes that competitors were making, they all of a sudden realized that they needed to move to a deployment model that allowed them to deliver things on a subscription basis. They knew that the revenue stream associated with that recurring revenue business, combined with the favorable margins that they would have from a portion of their business that was staying in perpetual license, was going to be very, very attractive to them. But they were really struggling to kind of take this on. And basically, through some of the technology and system decisions that they made, they were able to overcome the challenges here. Different buyers. The fact that the subscription model was going to add even more complexity to their business, pulling all these acquisitions in, and basically deciding that the cloud was the best way that they could go about overcoming these challenges. So as a result, they moved to a single system that manages both their recurring and traditional business models. They made tremendous improvements in consolidating their pricing and product catalog. Got great insight into analytics, and basically were able to make those acquisitions very successful. And you'll see here a lot of very impressive metrics that they've been able to post after making all of these different changes. Really exciting case study with Kana here. And then I just want to talk really quickly about another company. This is a company that from the beginning was based on a recurring revenue model, a company called Schedules. They provide web-based solutions to the hospitality industry, primarily restaurant chains. They've been growing very, very rapidly. They're headquartered down in Austin. They've got their solutions used in more than 7,000 restaurants and have over 700,000 active users with their system. So at Schedules, their challenges were a little bit different. They were always in a recurring revenue model, but they started experiencing 40%, 50% growth that really began accelerating, and that started in 2010. They doubled the number of employees. They started getting traction with larger hospitality chains, and they were basically, they were outgrowing their ability to stay on top of contract renewals, and they were also having a lot of challenges with billing, and this was impacting their ability to continue to recognize that growth, and they basically had a lot of manual processes, a lot of people dedicated to reconciliation that was time-consuming and prone to error. And basically by taking a lot of these best practices that we just discussed and taking a whole new look at their infrastructure, they moved to a solution where they were able to completely automate the renewal process. They have workflows that do that automatically now. They now have seamless handoff from sales to implementation, so there's no more errors in the billing and in terms of tracking the project timeline. And they now have automated revenue recognition that allows them to comply with EITF 0801 and completely everything's traceable with built-in audit trails, and they've had a lot of success since making a lot of these changes. So just one last slide, and that is, and these are just some things to keep in mind. There's a lot of, in a recurring revenue model, there's a lot of new expectation on the CFO. Building up that customer annuity and hanging on to it is paramount. And then, every quarter, this is a quote from our CFO, every quarter is a culmination of everything you've ever done, so consider the future as you're doing it. And then with that, I think maybe we have one more polling question.
We sure do. Thank you so much, Kim. That was wonderful. A lot of information there, and we've just gotten through, so we're going to quickly ask our second polling question and then see if we can get a question or two from the audience in real quickly. So the poll is up once again, even if you're not here for CPE credit. If you would give us 15 seconds, please take a quick look and take a stab at answering that question. And we'll revisit this as soon as we get done with the polling question. Also, we have a few questions queued up here. If you have any questions you'd like to ask Kimberly, feel free to ask them now. Even if we don't get to them, we'll go ahead and follow up with you afterwards to try and get you an answer. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and shut down the polling question here. And Kimberly, we're going to move into the Q&A portion at this point.
Yeah, I realized I talked a little bit longer than I intended. I apologize for that.
You know what? There's a lot of great content there, and thanks for getting through it. And I didn't cut you off because I thought it was valuable content. Let's take a quick look at the results of the polling question just so that folks can see what their peers had to say. The first question was, Mike, about your company and recurring revenue, if your company has recurring revenue or not. Interesting, about a third here said it's their only revenue model, and then we have a bunch of folks wanting to learn more. Kim, anything surprising in these results?
You know, it's interesting, the 30% no plans to move but wanted to learn more. That tells me that, you know, they recognize the shift, and they understand that it's important to learn about this. And just because you don't have plans now, I mean, that could change.
Yeah, there are. I mean, it was interesting, the Zipcar and Ford thing. I mean, boy, if that industry can go towards a recurring revenue model, then I think everything's in play at this point. So that was very interesting. Very quickly, let's go to the next poll question. And this is a question about, for folks who do have recurring revenue, how are they managing it? This is also interesting. Kimberly, what do you think about these results?
You know what? I'm not surprised to see spreadsheets. You know what? Finance, love their spreadsheets. I work in marketing. I love my spreadsheets. But, you know, it's interesting. And I talked about a lot of the challenges that can present. But there's a lot of people that that are doing some other things through their ERP or have a dedicated billing system, and that's fantastic.
Yeah, I'm actually surprised that spreadsheets are as low as they are here, although we have a fair chunk, 20%, who don't have recurring revenue. But still, that is interesting and telling. We have time for one question. We'll go ahead and do that. And then we've got a couple of housekeeping items. So just very quickly, Kimberly, when co-terminating, do you itemize the services on the renewal, or do you lump them all into one line item for your customers? What tends to be easier?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I've been at companies that do it both ways, or they do one. I've seen companies do them both ways. Here at NetSuite, actually, we break out the different line items. We feel like it's important to show the value of all different portions and components of the solution that they purchased from us. And so even though it's coterminous, you see that broken out separately as different line items on the sales order. However, I've also been with organizations where they lump it in, and if the customer really needs that detailed information, they can get it. Oftentimes, people who take that approach, it's because they probably have some kind of system limitation, and they're basically using spreadsheets to do a lot of manual calculations, and then rolling that up, if you will, to a single line item that then appears on the invoice. And the downside to that is that it can cause questions. The customer could ask, what's all included in this again? I forgot, or if you've got a new executive that all of a sudden you're dealing with, and then you can start kind of having to have maybe some conversations that you don't want to be having late in the renewal process.
Right, right. Okay, well, with that, I hate to say it, but we're at the end of our time. I will work with Kimberly to answer the other questions that we got, and we'll probably pop those out into Proformative for everyone to see. We had a couple questions about CPE credits. If you have any questions at all, please contact Tanya Walsh. She manages our CPE credits, and her email is at the bottom of this screen. Kimberly, thank you so much. Just a wonderful presentation, chock full of useful information, and we appreciate your giving us the time this morning.
It was my pleasure.
Of course, we'd like to thank our sponsor, NetSuite. They make this event possible, and NetSuite has been a great supporter of Proformative, and they help us keep everything on Proformative completely free for our users, so we greatly appreciate that. Finally, we would like to thank everyone in the audience. Your time's incredibly valuable. We really appreciate that you took an hour out of your day to spend with us. I hope that you got some good information and education out of this, and we certainly hope to see you back again, either online at performative.com in our community, or at another event. And as a final reminder, when I shut down this webinar, which I'll do in just a few moments here, you'll be presented with a brief questionnaire. If you could just give us 1 minute of your time and let us know what you thought, we'd love to do better the next time. So with that said, thank you, everyone. Have a great week, and, well, we'll see you next time.